what are the rapid growth leadership actions? Jim Kroenke was a leader in General Electric, and he got a dog of a project, okay? He got thrown into the plastics business, which was the worst performing business in General Electric. So here he is, he's made the global head of plastics, the single worst performing business in GE. Now, if you know much about GE, if you're the worst performing business in GE, you know that every single spotlight is sitting on you right now and watching what's going on. And all of your institutional investors also now know your name, are very aware of who you are basically pushing aside the CEO, and they're honing in and they're going, you're the weak part of the balance sheet, you're the weak part of our investment, let's watch what you're doing as well. And to make the scenario even worse, in their annual report, they have said, we have put him in the role to turn the plastics business around. So here's a guy walking in to take over a plastics business that he has to turn it around. The world's watching, and the pressure's a bit high. And we also know if he doesn't, he's pretty much going to be, he may stay in GE, it may not, but the plastics business definitely is not going to stay in GE's portfolio if he doesn't turn it around. Fair? GE is going to put it on the market to sell it off. Interesting enough, he takes it from being the dog of the balance sheet to turns it around to making it the fastest growing business in GE. How? He puts these actions into place. These are not the set of actions that he articulates. These are actions that we know, but when we look back at the case study, we can actually see there. He comes in and he demonstrates breakthrough thinking. He is quick to go in and to properly analyze the problem and get to the core issue. He's not looking at it saying, let's buy more players. He's coming in and saying, let's buy more runs. How do we actually get down to the level of buying the run? He's going in, he's analyzing the real problem, going to the real issue, and coming into it. From my experience, I've been doing this for 22 years, I think, and get the privilege of working with a lot of different organizations and seeing inside them. This is the area to where, whether you're looking at rapid growth leadership or high performance leadership, clearly makes the difference. You can see it in their case studies. You can see it in their practices. You can also see it in all of the research and the literature side. However, it's the piece that I see the least of in practice. I see time pushes us beyond actually stopping for a moment and really saying, let's analyze this issue. I've sat in strategy workshops and board meetings and watched companies literally debate and discuss issues, and I'm going, if you fix this, you just spent 4 hours on this, if you change this at all, will there be any difference in the business? And I kind of step back when you ask that question, and they look and they think for a moment, no. And we give our mental energy and we really dive into areas. If I make the subtlest change here, will it do anything for the business? Rather than getting down to the bottom line. Consistently, we hear, okay, in one-on-one, companies say, I'm not satisfied with the capability of my business. All right, probably if I took each of you to an individual coffee and sat down and said, tell me about your business, so we got into a dialogue, each of you would articulate at some point, I'm not thrilled with the depth of capability we have in our business. You can see where it's not at the level you would want it to be. Especially for the expats in the room when we ask the question, if you have worked for, not necessarily related to an expat, if you have worked for your same company outside, and we come back and say, so tell me what it was like in Australia, is it the same? You say no. Okay, we hear that, and that's not putting down the local market, okay, whatsoever at all. I'm looking at the complexity of working in regards to over 200 nationalities in a workforce. That has some factors in it we need to think about. So consistently, we hear that. But yet, I don't read it in board papers. I don't hear it discussed in management meetings. I hear it complained about, but not made as an action item. And when it becomes an action item, it's kind of, well, yeah, let's focus on HR training. This isn't about HR training. What we're really getting into is back to that proximity side, getting close enough and saying, how am I going to improve your capability? And much more importantly, how am I going to hold the managers accountable for the capability improvement? The thinking side of this is coming down and looking and saying, how are we going to do this? What are our real issues? What do we really need to be focusing on, and how do we do it? The other two that I want to pick up here are influential communication and building confidence. Influential communication is probably the hardest issue in this room. I'm going to come back to, I have said repeatedly, I've written about this in the articles in the National and other places I write, the GCC has the greatest management challenge of modern day business history. I have absolutely zero hesitation making this phrase. It's the greatest management challenge. And why do I say that? There are more nationalities in the workforce in the GCC than the United Nations has member countries. Okay? Does anybody here work for the UN before I go on this story a little bit? Okay. And edit this out of this video at the end of the day. Would you hold the UN up as a well-run company? And as being extremely effective in their output and what they're doing, and yet we get to work with even more than they have when you look at the complexity of it and you look at the workforce. On one side, we celebrate the diversity, which we should, but when we get to the other side, it brings up huge levels of confusion. And when we get to the crux of communication is when we get into the core issue of this, how we communicate, our understanding of terms, language we're using is where we get into the crux of it. I mean, I was sitting there, it's quite funny, actually. I'll tell a brief story on this. I'm okay on time, right? Okay, I'll tell a brief story on this that really drives the point home. There's hundreds of these I could tell, but in our villa, our windows open like this and this, okay? So we open one up, and then the wind inevitably closes the window. I'm sure several of you have this issue. So the worker comes into the house, and my wife turns to him. I have absolutely no idea why she thinks she's going to be able to communicate the scenario well, and says to him basically, when you should put a stopper in the window. It should be built with a stopper to hold the window open. And he looks at her with all sincerity, like you have to be the stupidest, dumbest woman I've ever met in my life. So here is probably a 20-year-old from the subcontinent coming in, and she said he literally just looks at her like, you are an ignorant woman. Says, no, madame, not like that at all. And she's thinking, why? He goes, no, you open both windows. Wind blow this way, open this window. Keeps it open. Wind blow this way, open this window. Keeps it open. And she's looking at him like, you have to be stupid. So she tries this out, goes home, opens the window up. The wind's blowing this way. She opens this window instead. When the wind changed directions, do you know what happened? The window reopens the other direction. So here she's looking at one type of solution, communicating in one way with one element of logic, and he's going, you have no clue what I'm dealing with. A couple of you heard the story, but it really drives the point home in regards to this idea of influential communication and multicultural communication, and really coming down to the crux of life, and I'll tie it into management. I was in Jeddah one day, and I was going to meet Savola Oil, and I was at the Hilton Hotel, and I remember ringing up the VP there who I was going to, and I'm like, now, how do I get there exactly? He goes, you're going to take a taxi, right? And I said, yes. He goes, okay. What I want you to do is go downstairs, just jump in a taxi, all right, and tell him to go to the roundabout where there's the empty field next to where the toy store used to be, where the big building next to that. So that I'm like, I'm holding the phone, and I'm waiting on the laughter. And he doesn't laugh. And I'm thinking, is he serious? Sorry, Mohammed, what was that again? So he repeats, go down, just get in a taxi, go out of the hotel, and tell him to go to the big building next to where the empty field is by where the toy store used to be. I'm like, you're sure? There's no other directions. There's nothing at all. Now, in my head, I have a very particular type of communication, understanding, direction, the way the whole system works. So I go down the stairs, having traveled a lot internationally. I get up to the car. I know if I ask that question, the answer is going to be yes, because we're getting into the area of honor and shame coming into the business. The natural answer is yes. Even if I have no idea where you're going, I don't tell you that till I'm lost. We've all had that experience in the taxi, right? So I'm thinking, let's start with a step of logic prior to this, and I'll ask, how long have you been here? If he hasn't been here for a long time, there's no way in the world he's going to know where an empty field is next to where the toy store used to be and a big building nearby. So as I'm asking, how long have you been here? He says 6 months. I quickly do the math. That means 3 months at best. And as that's being said, the bellman of the hotel shoving me in the car, closing the door, and we're heading out. I'm sitting in the back seat of the taxi. We're heading out. You sure you know where? And I'm repeating the whole instructions again. We come to the first roundabout. Is this it? No, sir, I know where it is. We're going on the next roundabout. Is this it? Are you sure? No, sir. And now his head, is doing what I wish I could do, but I can't do. Okay? And at that moment, I'm going down the road. I'm sitting in the car, and I'm forgetting what yes is and where I came from, what no is, where I came from, because I'm trying to figure out, is he saying yes, I really understand? No, I don't understand. I'm sweating worse than I am sitting here right now today. I'm going down the road. I'm thinking there's no way in the world we're going to make it to this meeting. Not a chance in the world. Finally, we get to a roundabout. We come up. I've given up. I'm sitting back in the car saying, forget the meeting. Thank God that I am in Saudi right now and they're okay with me being late for a meeting, is what I'm going through in my head. The meeting won't start on time anyway. As we come around and we pull straight up to the building, he's like, here you go, sir. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, why didn't he just say it's the 7th roundabout? That would have been much easier to understand, just simply saying it's the 7th roundabout. But it's the way we communicate, the style we use, what we're comfortable with. Now, think about how many times in business we give direction, we communicate in one way, and the other person's looking going, I don't have a clue what you're saying. I have no clue. And there's a study that I just read this past weekend that I think brings it to life. So the global multinational, and this was a native English speaker, realized that every time he walked in, when you're walking in a room, you can tell conversations going on. Every time he walked in the room and there were non-native English speakers in the room having a conversation, when he walked in, they stopped speaking. So he's recognizing that this is going on. And at first he goes to the natural thing, oh, they're giving respect to me because I'm the perceived person of authority, etc. And he realized that's not it whatsoever at all. The reason they're stopping speaking is two non-native English speakers speaking English together in this business, they had come to realize that it's okay for them to butcher the English language. It's fine to make mistakes as they're speaking English. It's fine for them to speak in the English they had created as the common language. So somebody from Korea speaking with somebody from Mexico, they were okay with this. But when the English speaker walked in the room, they were like, but we're not speaking at that level. And they also found out immediately at the moment that when the actual native English speaker started speaking their English, they didn't understand what they were saying. They understood the Korean, Mexican company version of English, but they didn't understand. They would say things like, straight from the horse's mouth. What horse? And they would speak very rapidly, like I am doing today, and apologize for. And I know I've used a few even American phrases in here today. And they were doing this, and they realized there's a huge problem. He went back and figured out that there's only 1,500 English words that need to be used in business for proper communication. And coming back and looking at influential communication, and I'm sitting here looking at this and thinking, that's probably something every one of us should put in place in our business, because when we start communicating and trying to drive rapid growth, we're communicating in a language that doesn't make any sense at all. I'm still convinced that 2 levels below us have no idea what a KPI really means. Did you get your KPI set? How are you doing on tracking on your KPIs? What do you mean tracking on a KPI? What does this really mean? What time am I supposed to be done? In 2 minutes. I'm going to tell 2 stories, okay? Late 1990s, I showed up into Beirut, Lebanon. Now, unfortunately, I was wearing a pair of khakis, tennis shoes, and a polo shirt, which I realize now is the definite way to get a lot of attention in Beirut, which you shouldn't be wearing. But I was dressed very American at the time. I dropped down, and if you know Beirut at all, I'm in an area of Beirut called Verdun. Now, growing up, I had been taught when you leave the hotel, you circle where the hotel is on the map, so you know where you're going. So I drop down into Beirut, I pull open this big map because I know where the hotel is on the map. I don't know where I am, but I know if I can figure out where I am, I can get to the hotel. Correct? Very logical system for using a map. So here, are you from Beirut?
Yes.
Okay, so you can pretty much guess what's about to happen. So here I am standing with this map. I'm being a very smart person, taking every lesson that my father taught me and I learned in Boy Scouts and putting them into action. And I call the guy over and he looks at it. I said, hey, can you tell me where we are? Now, the story I'm going to tell, that's going to take a minute or so to do, happens in seconds. So as this is happening, an American holding a big piece of paper on the corner of Beirut definitely draws some attention. So as Ali's coming up and I'm asking him to show me where we are, several other guys are herding in as well. So I have an audience now, okay, that has come around to watch this equation. So Ali says to me, what's that? So I think, like a typical person, I will teach him what a map is, not realizing that my objective is to find out where I am on the map. So I begin to explain to Ali it's a map and going on through the whole story of what's happening on it. And I said, so a map shows you how to get from where you are to where you're going. Now, what was my original question? Ali, where are we? Okay? So I say to him, a map shows you how to get from where you are to where you're going. He says, that's great. Where are we? And at that particular moment, I realized that maybe maps aren't used a lot in Beirut. And as time goes by, I realize that maybe maps aren't used a lot in the Middle East. As time has gone by, I've realized that east of the Mediterranean, maps aren't used. So that somewhere comprises about 3.5 to 4 billion people don't use a map. But yet, us smart leaders walk in and we talk about strategy maps. The concept of a strategy map is based upon, what's that 3-letter word at the end? A map. So we have taken things out of one particular culture, built them into our business systems, and we wonder why we don't get the rapid growth we're after. Rapid growth leadership is about reframing the way we're doing it, thinking differently about what we're doing, putting some common pieces into place and putting them into action. The movie Moneyball ends with something very specific and very, very interesting. When Peter turns back to Billy Bean, the general manager, and he says, you know what you have just done is going to frustrate the entire industry. And as I think about that for a moment, rapid growth leadership is going to frustrate nearly every leader and manager in your business because we're accustomed to operating one way. But yet we need to be leading an entirely different way and giving our focus in other areas.